Mr. Sanson, are you on mute? I'm sorry, yes, I was on mute. So I'm ready to receive the motion for the chair. Mr. Sanson, are you proposing a motion? Yes, I propose Brian May. He's been proposed by Mr. Sanson that Mr. May be elected chair of the committee. Any other motions?
Okay. I declare the motion carried and Mr. May duly elected chair of the committee. I invite Mr. May to take the chair.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. That was a tense moment there with that silence, but I'm glad we got through that. Does the committee wish to proceed at this time with the election of the vice chairs?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair. Can you indicate how you would like the excuse me, the committee members to notify you, whether it's the raised hand feature
Sure.
or it's simply by this?
So I will. I'll go through that, Mr. Broussard. If we can just get through the election of the vice chairs, and then I've got a bit of a script that we'll go through. Then I'll answer most of those questions.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Monsieur le Président, tout petit point d'ordre. Il n'y a pas de traduction française.
There is no French translation right now. I don't know why. There should be translation. You can't hear me?
You can give us a thumbs up if once it gets fixed. Still no translation. Any translation now? Monsieur Désolé, do you have the language selected on the bottom there?
Moi, j'entends la traduction quand je...
I hear translation. When I click on interpretation, there's a globe at the bottom. Besides the word participants, there's a globe that says participants. And I clicked on this. And I hear exactly what's been said.
Problem with the translation? Monsieur Désolé, you're on mute, sir.
Oui, toutes mes excuses.
Very sorry for this. I don't know, but it works now. I haven't modified anything, but it works. Thank you very much.
We will have technical difficulties with this, and I appreciate everyone's patience. So again, does the committee wish to proceed at this time with the election of the vice chairs? Seeing a lot of nodding heads. I invite the clerk to proceed with the election of the vice chairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Conformément à l'article 106.2, le premier vice-président doit être un député de l'opposition officielle. Je suis maintenant prête à recevoir des motions pour le premier vice-président.
If I can interrupt the clerk for just a moment now, I don't hear the French translation. So I was hearing the French translation without difficulty, but now that is not the case.
Okay. Verify with the interpreters.
La traduction est bien, monsieur.
Still no interpretation. Sorry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear interpretation now?
You want to test it out there again, Madam Clerk?
Yes, absolutely. Donc, conformément à l'article.
So pursuant to Section 106.2, the first vice chair must be a member of the official opposition. I'm now prepared to receive motions for the first vice chair. Madame la greffière, je serais ravie de nommer John Broussard. Merci. Madame Wagenthal a proposé Monsieur Brassard, qui devrait être élu le premier vice-président du comité. Y a-t-il d'autres motions? Je déclare la motion adoptée et M. Brassard est dûment élu comme premier vice-président du comité. Alors, conformément à l'article 106.2, le deuxième vice-président du comité doit être membre d'un parti d'opposition. Je demande maintenant une nomination. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to propose Mr. The interpreter didn't hear the name of the Mr. Désilet. So Mr. Désilet has been proposed to be the second vice chairman of the committee. Any other motions? Any other proposals? So I declare the motion adopted and Mr. Désilet duly elected as second chair of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Sanson.
Did have some continued difficulties with the translation. The French was coming through, but when people switched to English, I was hearing the French, not their microphone as well. So we do have some continued technical issues here. Did anybody else experience difficulties, or is it just me? You had difficulties? Yes. Okay. So just to clarify, when there was a switch from French to English, I heard the interpreter in both situations. One, I did hear the translation into English when the French was being spoken, but when the speaker switched to English, I was hearing the French being spoken in my ear, not the person speaking. Okay. So we'll just give them a few minutes here to see if they can figure out what the issue is here before we proceed. Was anybody having difficulty with anything other than the French translation? Was the English translation working for those that are listening on the French, or was it just the English that was having difficulties? We should be good. Okay, I'm just getting word that we should be good now to move forward. So that's great. Thank you. This is going to be an ongoing thing, folks, and I just wanted to say in the onset a huge thank you to the technical folks there in Ottawa. This is not going to be an easy process, and we will try and be as patient as possible as we learn together the process here. So before we get into the routine motions, I had promised MP Broussard that I would go through a bit of a run through in terms of how we would proceed. So first and foremost, thank you all for your confidence. It's an honor to chair this committee again. Today's meeting is taking place by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few things to follow moving forward. Number one, interpretation in the video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Two, as you are speaking, if you plan to alternate from one language to the other, you'll need to also switch the interpretation channel so it aligns with the language that you're speaking. You may want to allow for a short pause when switching the languages. 3, before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you're ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone. 4, a reminder that all comments by members should be addressed through the chair. 5, should members need to request the floor, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. 6, if a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, they should use the raise hand function. This will signal to the chair your interest to speak. In order to do so, you should click on the participants at the button at the bottom of the screen. When the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click raise hand. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. Number 8, when you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. Number 9, the use of the headset is strongly encouraged. In fact, I think if we can all agree that it would be not just an encouragement but a requirement, that would be good. The interpreters will have a very difficult time if you don't have your headset in use. Should any technical challenges arise, for example, in relation to interpretation, or a problem with your audio arises, please advise the chair immediately and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that you may need to suspend, we may need to suspend during these times, as we need to ensure all members are able to participate fully. Before we get started, can everyone click on their screen on the top right-hand corner to ensure that they are in gallery view? With this view, you should be able to see all the participants in a grid view. It will ensure that all video participants can see one another. If the committee wishes, we can now proceed to the consideration of routine motions.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
MP Blaney.
So I'm just asking for clarification. I just see on the screen here that a staff member from Mr. Broussard's office is here, and that is fine, but my staff don't have access. So I'm just wondering if this is a normal practice or something else has happened, just for clarity.
Non. Il n'y a pas d'affaire là, lui.
I'm not.
No, he shouldn't be there.
It says clerk. Okay. So I'm not sure who admitted him. So you're absolutely correct. MP Blaney, that person should not be on there. There is a phone line that staff can sign into. If your staff do not have that phone line, please let us know, the clerk know, and we'll get that to you right away. This is important because if they try to listen on the website, there is a delay, and so we want you guys to have access to your staff in real time. So the phone line is critical to use. But thank you for catching that, MP Blaney.
And no, I just thought something had changed and I was unaware. So thank you for that.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to routine motions? Okay, seeing none. I see the raise hand function, so very good, MP Lalonde, for using that. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and wishing you congratulations from the people here in Orleans on this appointment as chair. I would like to bring, Mr. Chair, the routine motion. So I would like to start with the analyst services, that the committee retain as needed and at the discretion of the chair the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist in its work.
Any discussion? All those in favor? I guess that's a question for the clerk. Is a hand up? Is that sufficient? Okay. Okay. So as long as we have, I'm just getting word here. So as long as we have agreement from everybody, we can move forward in that way. So at this point, seeing no disagreement, I would like to invite Jean Rodrigue Perret, the committee's analyst, to activate his camera in order to participate in the meeting. Seeing that he's just joined us. Hello, sir.
Bonjour. Alors,
Hello. I will bring a few comments in French so that interpretation can go smoothly. I'm pleased to be back. I know some of you. If you need anything with regards to content on organizing different files or different files, I will be pleased to help you and to accompany you throughout this session. Thank you very much.
Excellent. MP Lalonde, back to you.
Thank you very much. We will continue with the subcommittee on agenda and procedure. That the subcommittee on agenda and procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, the chair, 1 member from each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration.
Any discussion? All in favor? Excellent. MP Lalonde.
On va maintenant passer aux réunions.
We are now moving on to meeting without a quorum. That the chair be authorized to hold meetings, to receive evidence, and to have that evidence printed when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members from the opposition and 2 members of the government. But when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present.
Sorry, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Excellent. MP Lalonde.
Time for opening remarks and questioning of witnesses. That witnesses be giving 10 minutes for their opening statement, that at the discretion of the chair during the questioning of witnesses, there will be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows. Round 1. Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, New Democrat Party. For the second and subsequent rounds, the order and time for questioning be as follows. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes. Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes. New Democrat Party, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Chair.
Rachel Blaney, MP Blaney.
Thank you. And again, I just wanted to add my congratulations. I've always enjoyed having you as a chair, so I'm happy to see that happening again. I just have a couple of amendments that I would like to propose. In PROC and in many other committees, they have actually looked at the 10-minute timeline for opening statement and changed to between 5 and 7.5 minutes, just to make sure that people do their presentations, but we get through it quickly so we can get to the question portion, which is so important. And the other amendment I would like to propose in this section is changing the second round to Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes, Bloc 2.5, New Democrat 2.5, Conservative 5 minutes, and Liberals 5 minutes. Again, this has been done in PROC and in the majority of the other committees that have met at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on this amendment? I guess we have to deal with the amendment obviously first. Monsieur Broussard.
Thank you. Rachel, just wondering if you could clarify, you said you're proposing to reduce the 10-minute timeline to, you said 5 to 7.5 minutes.
Yeah. So I would recommend 5. Thank you for that question. I think that's important. I just know that in other committees, they've largely gone between 5 to 7.5. So for some, they've done 5. That's what Proc did. Yesterday, for example, INAN did 7 or 6. And I know some other committees have done 7.5. So I would propose 5.
Okay, and so that would, because of the timeline, then you're proposing that would extend the level of questioning into a third round, right?
It potentially could.
Okay,
depending on how many witnesses we have.
Right. So just so that I'm clear again, and so that everybody else is clear, because this is the first time I'm hearing about this. So in the case of the Conservatives, it would be a 6-minute first round, 5-minute second round, and you're proposing a potential of a 5-minute third round, correct? If the timeline is good. Okay. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Will? MP Amos, excuse me.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations for being elected as chair. I'd like to indicate that I support the amendments put forward by Ms. Blaney.
Okay. Any further discussion? MP Lalonde.
Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering, sorry, my phone line is, I'm just questioning if the suggestion of MP Blaney is for 5 or 7.5. What is part of her amendment to the motion, please? Just clarification.
So my recommendation is 5. And I just wanted to make it clear to the committee that other committees had discussions and they had moved it between 5 and 7.5. I just wanted to make sure to share that information. My recommendation is 5.
So, Mr. Chair, I would support the 5 minutes amendment also.
Okay. Just before we move on, does the clerk have any questions in terms of clarification on the amendment?
Yeah, thank you. So the amendment is that witnesses be given 5 minutes for their opening statements. And then when we go down the text of the motion, I can read it all, and then Ms. Blaney, you can make sure that I have it down correctly. That witnesses be given 5 minutes for their opening statement, that at the discretion of the chair during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated 6 minutes for the first questioner of each party as follows. Round 1, Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, New Democratic Party, and that for the second and subsequent rounds, and then this is where the other amendment, the order and time for questioning be as follows: Conservative Party 5 minutes, Liberal Party 5 minutes, Bloc Québécois 2.5 minutes, New Democratic Party 2.5 minutes, Conservative Party 5 minutes, and Liberal Party 5 minutes. Is that correct?
Okay, that is correct.
Excellent. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
MP Albus, please.
Yes, I'm not I'm a steady committee member, but one thing I just would be mindful of is 5 minutes can be awful short. And so if there is a veteran that does come that has issues with speaking, I would just ask you to use a little bit of discretion. All members use a little bit of discretion to allow them to have their say. Coming to this committee probably can be one of the most intimidating things that a veteran can do. But I would hope that all members would just show a little bit of compassion in those unique situations. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I would concur with that, MP Albus. Thank you for bringing that up. MP Wagentall.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I would prefer that on the basis of what Dan has said, this is very true. And we want to be able to know that they're comfortable coming and that they aren't pressured. And it's just so limiting. I would prefer to see 7 minutes as the standard. compromise.
Okay. We would have to move and dispense MP Blaney's amendment before we would discuss an additional amendment if we want to change that time.
So and maybe Brian, sorry, or Chair, sorry,
MP Broussard?
if Rachel is good with this, what I would propose is that it could be up to 7 minutes rather than just a straight 5, but that the witnesses could have up to 7 minutes for their opening statement. So that might resolve the situation of whether it's 5 or 7. At least we can give them up to 7. So that might be a resolution.
So again, that's an additional amendment that we'd have to come back to. I just want to make sure we're staying in sort of the realm of procedure here in terms of dealing with the motion. The exception, I'll confer with the clerk, but if MP Blaney would amend her motion, I think that would be okay.
So, Mr. Chair, yesterday when I moved something similar in INAN, of course, we talked about elders and needing the time. So that's why we felt it was important, of course, to leave the discretion of the chair. And there was a friendly amendment for rather than 5 minutes, 6 minutes. And so I'm more than happy to see Ms. Wagenthal's amendment as a friendly amendment to my amendment. I don't know if that's procedurally correct, and I leave it to the chair to let me know.
Okay, I can simply say, folks, that if that latitude is still there for the chair to have those conversations before the meeting, obviously it would depend too on how many witnesses we have at the meeting. If there's one witness, we have a lot more leeway. But in order for this new the second part of your amendment to work, we're going to have to shorten the witnesses time a little bit. Did I see MP Casey's got his hand up as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would not support the opening statements being any more than 5 minutes, and here's why. So let me say this: my support for the motion will be conditional on the opening statements being limited to 5 minutes. I agree that the chair should have discretion in the circumstances such as Mr. Albus described. But in the first round, you have 4 6-minute slots. That's 24 minutes. In the second and subsequent rounds, you have 4 5-minute slots and 2 2.5-minute slots. That's 25. So you have 49 minutes of questioning. Take that 49 minutes of questioning, add 2 witnesses at 5 minutes each. There's your 59 minutes for one panel. The problem that I have is that if you increase the time for the presentations, the slot that gets cut is the Liberal slot at the end. So for me to be comfortable moving us to the back of the line and moving the NDP and the Bloc up the line from where they were in the last Parliament, I would want to have the assurance that there's some hope of getting to us. And that assurance is gone if the opening statements are longer than 5 minutes.
I'm happy to leave my motion at 5 minutes.
Any further discussion before because we do have to deal with MP Blaney's initial amendment. Okay. Just to clarify from the clerk, we'll be voting on MP Blaney's amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Would we need to do a recorded division on this?
If the whole committee agrees, then we don't need to go to a recorded division, but we can also, if not everyone agrees, then we can go to a recorded division.
Okay. Can I ask, does the committee can either nod of the head or the shake of the head agree with MP Blaney's amendment?
We agree.
Excellent. Okay. So that carries. Back to MP Lalonde, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, I was looking at the document distribution, that only the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee only when documents are available in both official languages, and that witnesses be advised accordingly.
Seeing none, all those in favor? Good. Excellent. MP Lalonde?
Repas de
Working meals. That the clerk of the committee be authorized to make the necessary arrangements to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittees.
Excellent. Carries. MP Lalonde?
I'm going to continue. Travel, accommodation, and living expenses of witnesses. That, if requested, reasonable travel, accommodation, and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, and that, in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representatives be made at the discretion of the chair.
All those in favor? Excellent. Carries. MP Lalonde?
Access to in-camera meetings. That, unless otherwise ordered, each committee member be allowed to have one staff member at an in-camera meeting, and that one additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present.
All those in favor? Carries. MP Lalonde?
Transcripts of in-camera meetings. That one copy of the transcript of each in-camera meeting be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultation by members of the committee or by their staff.
MP Broussard?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair. I know that it's been the experience of other committees for the chair to ask for unanimous consent, given the fact that we are virtual. So I'm going to make a suggestion that we verbalize our consent as opposed to maybe going to a recorded vote. If there's a need to go to a recorded vote, then we do that. But I think we should be verbalizing our consent just so that everyone is clear where everyone stands. Thank you. Just a suggestion.
Sure. Just so I'm clear, you're referring to this process we're going through right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's exactly what I'm referring to. So
okay. It just gets really tough with everybody all talking at the same time. The microphones don't really work that way. So I'm trying to do that visually. We can try it. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure the interpreter.
You can direct and call us on it, right? Do the conservatives agree? Yes. Do the liberals agree?
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's my suggestion.
Okay. Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. I can I make a suggestion just for speed? I could change this and say, does anybody disagree? And if anybody disagrees, then they can verbalize it at that point. I'm just thinking getting through these, trying to get through these as efficiently as possible. Is that a good compromise?
I agree.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I lost my place. I'm not sure where I was at, to be honest.
You were on meals.
I was on notice of motion, I think.
No,
I wasn't on meals.
No.
I'm only kidding.
I know.
Nice try. So any discussion on notice of motion? Oh no, we haven't read it yet. Okay. MP Lalonde. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, I'm starting to be confused myself, so I'm now at notice of motion. That a 48-hour notice, interpreted as 2 nights, shall be required for any substantive motion to be considered by the committee unless the substantive motion relates directly to business then under consideration, provided that 1. The notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday, that 2. The motion be distributed to members in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted if it was received no later than the deadline hour, and that 3. Notices received after the deadline hour or on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day, and that when the committee is traveling outside of the parliamentary precinct, no substantive motions may be moved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Anyone disagree with the motion? Seeing none, carries. MP Lalonde.
Thank you. The last routine motion. Orders of reference from the House respecting bills. That, in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, A. The clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not a member of a caucus represented on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of the committee, in both official languages, any amendments to the bill which is the subject of the said order, which they would suggest that the committee consider. B. Suggested amendments filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendments relate shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that the committee may, by motion, vary this deadline in respect of a given bill. And C. During the clause-by-clause consideration of a bill, the chair shall allow a member who filed suggested amendments pursuant to paragraph A an opportunity to make brief representations in support of them.
Seeing none, anyone disagree with that motion? Seeing no disagreement, that carries. Seeing no other routine motions, does the committee wish to discuss future business at this time? I see, I don't know if this is an old hand up, but I see Sean Casey has his hand up. MP Casey?
About 58 years old. I have a motion to present, Mr. Chair, and this is what I would call a continuation motion. So the motion is as follows: that the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs agrees that all substantive motions adopted by the committee to undertake studies or hear from witnesses in the first session of the 43rd Parliament are hereby readopted by the committee without modification or amendment. That's the motion I wish to present. And then if I could just offer a little bit of color, because I know that we do have some new members of the committee. Essentially, the committee had adopted as a work plan 4 specific motions and had assigned priorities to each of them. And they covered, first and foremost, as the first order of business, was the backlog, and dedicated no fewer than 4 meetings to that study. The second was to undertake a study of federal supports and services to veterans, caregivers, and families, with no fewer than 3 meetings dedicated to that study. And the third order of business was undertake a study of the efficacy and use of psychiatric service dogs, and that no more than 3 meetings to be devoted to that study. And the fourth was a study on commemoration with no fewer than 3 meetings. So that's just by way of background. But the motion essentially is to re-adopt all of those 4 substantive motions as our work plan. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I see a few other people have put their hand up. Just for clarification, Monsieur Desolé, you had your hand up very briefly and brought it down. So I just want to make sure that you're good.
C'est pas.
Okay.
Oui, tout est correct, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, everything's fine, Mr. Chair.
Is your intervention about MP Casey's motion, or is this an additional motion that you'd like to bring forward?
So I will just speak to Mr. Casey's motion first.
Okay.
So I agree that the studies, of course, that this committee had put forward earlier in the session are important ones. I do think we need to revisit these. I have some additions that I would like to look at. So I'm not comfortable supporting the motion unless I have more clarity about the process. My understanding is that the subcommittee would be able to meet, review what has been done, and look at any new motions that are applied, and then create a work plan based on that, because things have changed. I think it's important to continue a study on the disability backlog, but it has been a significant amount of months. There's a PBO report that, of course, all of you know I'm very interested in following up on and making sure that we get more clarity on that. So I guess what I'm saying is I want to know the process before I commit to agreeing to anything. And I don't think moving forward with the old work plan makes sense until there is a more substantive debate about where we need to go. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. If I can add, I would agree that things have definitely changed. And the focus, I think, in not to speak for Mr. Casey, but I believe is to get us moving on back up and running, hit the ground running, so to speak. But I agree that a subcommittee is a very good idea to flesh out the specifics of each of these meetings. Or each of these studies to make sure that they're substantive enough and have the right focus. But I think that would be determined in subcommittee, not in relation to MP Casey's motion. I think they're not completely necessary to have the subcommittee before we can move this motion so that we can give direction to the clerk to get moving back up and running.
So if I may, then I would want to, I would like to hear the motion again. And my feeling would be that what I might want to amend is that the first meeting prior to the whole committee meeting is a subcommittee meeting to put forward a work plan, so that's what we're bringing to the first meeting of all members, is a plan about how we're moving forward to have that discussion in our first, or I guess second after this committee meeting.
Yeah. So we have to discuss Mr. Casey's motion and vote on Mr. Casey's motion first, but then we can discuss what the next meeting looks like, and I think, like I said, I don't think these things are I don't think we have to defeat Mr. Casey's motion in order to have a subcommittee meeting. It's what I'm trying to say. But Mr. Casey, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate.
The only thing that I wanted to do was to, as Ms. Blaney suggested, was to reread the motion. And it is that the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs agrees that all substantive motions adopted by the committee to undertake studies or hear from witnesses in the first session of the 43rd Parliament are hereby readopted by the committee without modification or amendment. So I would take that to mean exactly as you indicated, Mr. Chair, or it's intended to mean that at our next meeting we would start in with the backlog study, because that was what was adopted in the last Parliament.
A subcommittee meeting could also be in addition to our next scheduled meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
Agreed.
Okay, but the motion says without modification or amendment. I can't support that because I would want to modify the study on backlog. So I'm just being clear. I will not support the motion because of that language.
I understand that. I think any motion that we move here, again, just gives direction to the clerk to get started. We would follow that up with the subcommittee meeting. So if there are those adjustments needed, we can do that then and there. I think we agree. MP Blaney, that's a good course to move on. Is there any other discussion?
Yeah.
MP Broussard?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure the raised hand function is working properly because I've raised it about 3 or 4 times.
Oh, I'm sorry, it didn't come up. Do you want to give it a test right now and see if it comes up?
I will. It does. It comes up on my screen.
I can see you. I can see you on my screen, but I don't see the raised hands. No. Okay. So you're using okay, that's a little different.
Okay. Oh, you want the participant raised hand?
Yes, please.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Just in case, for whatever reason, you're not on my my screen. There we go. Yep, I can see you just fine there, sir.
I think I would have learned my lesson with
No.
that's what we were doing. Okay. Yeah, and frankly, I share Rachel's concern the without amendment aspect of this motion. I believe that there are some significant issues that we still need to deal with. We've got, as Rachel said, the Parliamentary Budget Office report on the backlog. There's a lot of new information in there, so I'm not in disagreement with moving on that report and the backlog situation. But one thing, the process is that we go to the subcommittee, and my concern is that with respect to family caregiver, the efficacy of service dogs, and the backlog, or sorry, what was the other one? There were 4 specific things that in effect sets course and direction for this committee. There's a new session. There's more information. We've had the supplementary estimates, for example, that have been tabled in the House of Commons. We haven't dealt with that issue. That doesn't reflect what's in Mr. Casey's motion. There's an order of the House on April 20th for committees to look into this and report back by November 27th. So I think I'm not going to support this motion as is, and the Conservatives will not support this motion as is. I think we need to go to the process, have the subcommittee provide direction, and then have the clerk work on whatever comes out of that subcommittee at that time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and I see MP Wagenthal as well has the raised hand function there.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't believe that this can actually be done as it's being presented today, as those motions were all dissolved. So he'd have to bring back the evidence and witness testimony and table a whole new motion, even if it's the same. So my understanding is this blanket motion can't actually take place. Thank you.
We can definitely ask the clerk for some direction on that. I believe we are able to do that, but maybe the clerk can shed some clarification if it's out of order. But I don't believe it is out of order.
Just one moment. I'm just consulting.
MP Casey, you have your hand up again.
On that point, Mr. Chair, with respect to the 4 motions that were adopted, there was only one on which we heard any testimony, and that was with respect to the backlog. So if there is an issue over the fact that we've received testimony, it would only be applicable to the one. I'm not sure why we wouldn't be able to consider read into the record the testimony from that previous meeting, but I certainly defer to the clerk on that.
I will also point out, folks, that we don't actually have a schedule for this committee as of right now. I know there's still negotiations happening in terms of when that's going to be. But we can most certainly use this normal time slot for a subcommittee meeting if we don't have that schedule ready to roll.
Mr. Chair, my name is Christine Lafrance. I'm another clerk in the House of Commons.
Hello.
So if I can shed some light
Please.
on this motion. it's a whole new session. So what happens before, in terms of procedurally speaking, hasn't happened, is not in front of the committee right now. So if the committee wants to follow up on these studies, I would suggest that every motion would be adopted one by one, re-adopted, and that the committee undertake a study on what blah 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 on what you want to do, and also we have some wording that to import into the session what whatever happened during the last session. So, for example, it would be that pursuant to the Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on subject, and that the evidence and documentation received by the committee during the first session of the 43rd Parliament on the subject be taken into consideration by the committee in the current session. So that would be the appropriate way to continue a study that was started in the previous session, one by one, because the motion says all substantive motions, it means that I don't know how many motions the committee has adopted during the last session, but it means that all those would be imported.
No, that's a very, very good point, and thank you very much for that clarification. I would ask Mr. Casey, would it make sense to withdraw this motion and move this to a discussion as the next available opportunity, which we would convene and have a subcommittee meeting?
Based on that advice, I think that is the logical next step, Mr. Chair. So you can consider my motion withdrawn.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, and thank you all for catching that. I have Monsieur Broussard has his hand up on the feature, and I see Monsieur Desilets as well. So I will go to MP Broussard first.
Yeah, and thank you, Chair. And I'm glad that the clerk clarified that, because the logical next step in this new session of Parliament is to go to the subcommittee and deal with not just potential motions, but the agenda, the dates of the meetings. That is the logical next step in the process, and I'm glad that the clerk clarified that. Thank you.
MP Desilets.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Would it be time now to present some motions? If yes, some motions could allow my colleagues to agree.
We are in committee business, so it is proper to move motions. If it's pertaining to our study schedule, I would ask that maybe we move that to the subcommittee, so we're not dividing, but that's up to you, sir.
I would have 4 motions I would like to present, Mr. Chair, if you allow me to do so.
I don't have them to share with the rest of the committee, so we're just just to clarify, we're just putting them on notice. Is that correct?
They would have been shared and even translated at this time, if I'm right.
Yes, the clerk did receive them just before the committee meeting, but did not have an opportunity to review them as of yet. But you can absolutely read them into the record.
So I will read them, and I will read them slowly to make sure that interpreters can work normally. Mr. Chairman, first motion, that pursuant to section 108.2 of the rule, that the committee started as soon as possible the study on arrears and on also the benefits for handicaps for veterans. And all this was decided during the 3rd session of this Parliament, that the committee study precisely the possibility of reapproving all the requests for handicap to the Department of Veterans, that the testimonies that were collected by the committee be taken into account by the committee during the current session. So this would be my first motion, Mr. President, Mr. Chair. Can I go on? Is the rhythm all right for the translators? Okay, could be a little slower.
Floor, please.
Avec
Okay, with pleasure. Second motion, that pursuant to section 1082 of the rule, the committee starts a study on the living conditions of veterans in the major centers, the big centers, and on the impact of pandemic COVID-19 on those, that the committee devotes a minimum of 4 meetings, 4 sessions to this particular study, and that the committee reports its conclusions and its recommendations to the House. Third motion, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, rather, pursuant to section 1082 of the rule,
que le comité entreprenne une étude that a committee has a study on the delays in administrative treatment of files, and that the committee looks at the differences between the timelines for dealing with the files of veterans that are Anglophones and those that are Francophones. That the committee spends at least 2 meetings on this study, and that the committee reports its finding and recommendations to the House. Last motion, Mr. Chair, that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee proceeds with a study on the challenges and the obstacles that minorities are faced with within veterans. And I'm talking about women, LGBTQ2+, and racialized veterans. That the committee looks at the specific needs of these minority groups within the veteran population and on the support measures and the services specific to those populations that could be put in place by VAC. That the committee spends at least 3 meetings on the study, and that the committee reports its findings and recommendations to the House of Commons. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my 4 motions.
Thank you, Deputy Desilets.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order.
Oh, okay. On this particular motion, sir?
On the motions that were just presented,
Sure.
and I need clarification from you. Are we proceeding with notices of motions here, or are these motions being tabled for debate right now? I don't understand.
Sure.
how this process is playing out, because
Yep.
I have motions that I can put on notice as well, and I'm prepared to do that. But are we going to be debating these 4 motions, and then the subsequent motions I suspect are coming from Ms. Blaney, and then the motions that I'm going to be putting forward?
Yeah.
Are we debating that today, or are we just putting these motions on notice?
I don't want to speak for Monsieur Deslay, but I suspect that these are to be just put on notice. I think we had just agreed just a few moments ago that we needed to push MP Casey's motion to a subcommittee, and I think we should do that with all of these. If you want to read into the record for the purpose of getting it on notice, we can definitely do that. But I think the commitment that we just made was we're going to move to subcommittee to deal with all of these in a substantive way, one by one, so that we can draw out that new roadmap for us for this committee. I don't have, unfortunately, these motions to distribute. The clerk has them, but they haven't been translated, so I can't distribute the motions to even have us take a look through with a fine-tooth comb. So I'm definitely open for folks if they want to jump on and move a notice of motion as Monsieur Deslay just did. But I would recommend strongly that we move all of this to the subcommittee to discuss. Does that answer your question, Monsieur Bessard?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. So in terms of order, I've got a couple of raised hands here. I've got Rachel, and then Monsieur Bessard, and then Sean Casey. So we'll go to Rachel first. Is this a motion, or is this to discuss?
This is not a motion.
Okay.
I have a motion to propose, but I'm more than happy, if I understand the clarity that I think I've reached, is that we can do that through the process, do the notice to motion through the clerk, and then have
Correct.
this discussion during the appropriate time at the subcommittee meeting.
Correct.
So if that's how that's going to work, then I think I will go through that process. And I wanted to recognize that, and thank you so much for those motions. I found some of them very thoughtful, and I look forward to discussing them. I just recognize how unprecedented these times are, and that we don't know a lot about when committees are going to be meeting. I know that the House is working very hard, and just thank them so much for their incredible work to make sure that we move as quickly as possible and get committees up and running, and I know that will happen. So I'm just wondering, Chair, if you could speak to, just clarify, I guess, for me, that what I think I'm hearing is that our first meeting, once the whips make their agreement and send that out and it's public, that meeting will be, in fact, a meeting of the subcommittee, so that they can bring forward to the full committee recommendations about how to move forward. And at that point, we can review all motions that have been put forward, and perhaps amend and put together some that are similar, and then present something to the larger committee. Just looking for clarification.
Yes, I would say that's the intent, to move forward with the very next meeting being a subcommittee meeting, so that we can do this properly. And I know through the clerk that we have received motions from other members, and we can circulate those in as quick a time as possible. Monsieur Broussard is next, and then I've got MP Casey, and then MP Deslay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm gonna run through these quickly, and I know, and I think the clerk can confirm that she did receive our notice of motions, as well as the translation of those motions. If she can just confirm that for the record, I would appreciate that.
Yes, Mr. Broussard, I have received your notices of motion. I have them in both languages, and if members wish, I could circulate those through the P9 addresses right now.
Right. So since I have the floor, I am gonna read these motions and put them on notice into the record in advance of us going into subcommittee. Motion number one is that, pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee undertake the study of the supplementary estimates B 2019-2020, and the committee invite the Minister of Veterans Affairs and the department officials to appear. And I will note as well that the estimates, as I said earlier, were tabled September 30th, and that pursuant to Standing Order 81-4 and the order made on Monday, April 20th, each committee may consider and report or shall be deemed to have reported the same back to the House no later than Friday, November 27th, 2020. So I think it's important that we pursue the supplementary estimates in advance of that timeline of November 27th, 2020. The second motion on notice is that as its first order of business and pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee conduct a study of the backlog of pending veteran disability benefit applications at Veterans Affairs Canada, and that no fewer than 4 meetings be devoted to this study. I want to commend Ms. Blaney for her question to the PBO on the backlog and the subsequent report that was issued last week, outlining that we are upwards of 50,000 cases now of veterans and their families not receiving adjudication or decisions on their claims. And I think that is a extremely important study to partake in, to have witnesses, to have the PBO come in. And I want to thank again Ms. Blaney for that. Motion 3, that it's on notice that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake the study, the Royal Canadian Legion and other veteran organizations and their financial health during and after the COVID-19 crisis. This is something that has come to the attention of all Canadians. The situation involving veterans organizations, the RCL. I know that Bill C4 addresses some of the issue, but this is not a just now issue. This is going to be a long-standing problem across this country for these service organizations, including Dominion Command and the Royal Canadian Legion, to help veterans and their families as we move forward, because many of them are facing financial hardship. And I think it's important that we look at these organizations and the impact that not having many of these service organizations be able to function in their proper fashion. We need that to study the impact on veterans and their families and for those organizations. And the final motion that's on notice, that as the fourth order of business, and I'm glad to see Mr. Casey sees this as important, and pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study of the efficacy and use of psychiatric service dogs by Canadian Armed Forces veterans to alleviate the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, be that the resources required by Veterans Affairs Canada to implement access to psychiatric service dogs, see the challenges associated with housing faced by veterans with a psychiatric service dog, and D, what should constitute minimum national standards for the training of PTSD psychiatric service dogs, and no fewer than 3 meetings be devoted to this study. As Mr. Casey indicated, this was a study that was being done in the previous session of Parliament. We feel that it is extremely important, and the time is now to continue on with that study. So those are the notice of motions, Mr. Chair, that are in front of the committee, and I'll be glad to speak to these as we move to the subcommittee and figure out what the agenda is going to be going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. MP Casey, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to take my lead from Mr. Brassard, and he has now put on notice 2 of the 4 motions that were part of my original motion that was withdrawn. I just want to put the other 2 on notice to be referred to the subcommittee as well. And they are pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study of federal supports and services to Canadian veterans, caregivers, and families, that the committee report its findings to the House with recommendations on how the government could improve these services and supports to better meet the unique needs of veterans, caregivers, and families, and that no fewer than 3 meetings be devoted to the study. That's the first motion to be put before the subcommittee, Mr. Chair, and the second is the following. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study of a long-term Canadian strategy for commemorations, which recognizes and honors the service, sacrifice, and achievements of all Canadian veterans, takes into consideration future events, monuments, memorials, graves, and cemeteries, both at home and abroad, that the committee invite officials from Veterans Affairs Canada, interested stakeholders, and Canadian veterans, educators, and other partners, that the committee report its findings to the House with recommendations to the government on the best way forward in the 21st century to inspire and educate Canadians and citizens around the world, to recognize the service and sacrifice of all who have served our country, and that no fewer than 3 meetings be devoted to the study. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And just a reminder, MP Casey, if you could send those to the clerk so she's able to distribute them.
Happy to do that.
Thank you. MP Desilets, you have your hand up as well.
Monsieur le Président, bon,
Mr. Chair, it's a little bit late, but it was to say that I was in agreement with your way of functioning with the subcommittees. Thank you.
We lost somebody? Oh, and welcome to MP Carey. Just getting in under the wire here to the meeting. Well, good to see you, sir. I see no other hands at this point. Is there any additional committee business before I call for agreement to adjourn? Okay, seeing none. Is the committee in agreement to adjourn the meeting? Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. It's a great start. We had a few technical glitches at the beginning. Huge thank you to everybody there in Ottawa that make this possible. And I think we always seem to work well together. So thank you very much, everybody, and take care. Have a great rest of your week. Bye bye. Meeting is adjourned. I don't have a gavel. I need a gavel.